What do you know about Russia and Russians? It's cold, right? Bears roam the streets of Moscow because food is abundant. What constitutes food for a Russian bear? Why, passed out drunk people, of course. If you believe that, then I'm willing to make an educated guess. You believe Fox News, too. I'm Nick Blake, and today we look at why you think Russians are scary.
Currently live in New York City, which is, it's there. I've been living in New York about 6 years now, and when I first moved there, I had a huge fear I was going to get mugged. Constantly. Like, every time I left the house, I was like, here it comes. Someone's going to take everything. I got over my fear because I learned a trick, and now I use this trick all the time. Whenever I think someone might try to beat me up or mug me, I fake a Russian accent. You're welcome. It's genius. I'll be walking home late at night, two dangerous-looking thugs walk up to me like, yo, man, you know what neighborhood you're in? You think this bad neighborhood? Russians are the scariest white people. They've earned it. I'm so scared of them that I guarantee you if I was lost, dangerously lost, there is no way I'd ask a Russian for directions. Just real quick, like, sir, help me. Please help me. How do I get to the subway? This subway? Walk down the street and turn corner. Yeah, screw that. I think I'm just going to stay lost.
That was Dan Soder, propagating the scary white people image. I recommend visiting Brighton Beach if you want to do more digging. Bring a dictionary, because many who live there never moved further in their development after emigrating to the United States. After World War II is when the real action began. And when I say action, I don't mean a bum chicka wow wow. Spy stories mixed with the emergence of TV and Edward Bernays' propaganda machine began its work and the enemy was created. Believe it or not, this goes on until this very day. Take a glance at Rob Slane's step-by-step guide on how to write a scare story about Russia.
Stories about Russia and the Western media, as they very often start with words such as fears are growing that, or concern is growing in Western capitals, that kind of thing. And so it's basically playing on the fear factor, which is something that the Western media has been trying to do over the last couple of years, stoking up a fear, almost taking us back to the Cold War days, where perhaps in the West there was a genuine fear, and there was reason to fear the Soviet Union at the time. I don't personally think that we have anything to fear from Russia if we treat Russia at the moment as a sensible country. Unfortunately, in the Western media, we don't, and it's this fear factor, and using words like fear and concern, which you see cropping up time and time again. I'm not really quite sure myself of how far this goes. I mean, certainly the neocon worldview is basically we must have an external enemy, and if there isn't an external enemy, then we must create one. It's what apparently is there to hold us all together, which is utter nonsense, of course.
It is important to note that in times of trouble, strong leadership is key. But what constitutes strong leadership? Many have criticized both Russian and U.S. presidents on various accounts. But to me, if a president of a country has to, for the 10th time, address the nation by saying, please, please, please stop shooting each other, that just doesn't really look very impressive. On the other hand, if a president shows up to a factory that greedy oligarchs have plundered into submission and are blackmailing the unions for compensation, if this president solves the problem by making the problem go away with a stroke of a pen, that is quite a move. I'm talking, of course, about Obama's speech in response to Oregon's shooting and Putin's visit to Deripaska's factory. YouTube both clips and see the difference. Which of the two looks more convincing? Some stories are misinformation, some are just blatant lies, but many are plain funny. Early on in 2015, Sweden has proclaimed it identified a Russian submarine in its waters. To ward off potentially similar instances, Sweden placed Morse code devices underwater that would transmit messages along the lines of, "This way if you are gay." Now, I have news for you folks. If you are a U-boat sailor and you spend most of the time in close proximity with 30 to 40 other men for a majority of the year in a confined space such as a submarine, you're most likely used to male attention, if you know what I'm saying. There was no Russian submarine in Sweden. I bet, however, that if Russian sailors decide indeed to defect, Sweden better deliver on their promise. For some reason, many believe Russians have no sense of humor. Even 30 years ago, these stereotypes were propagated and bashed into our heads. Listen to Yakov Smirnoff, the most famous Soviet comedian of the United States.
It's hard to do comedy in Soviet Union because you have to write out all your material and you send it to Department of Jokes. And I'm not making this up. Every state in Soviet Union has a Department of Jokes. They censor your material, they send it to Moscow. There's a big Department of Jokes. They send it back to you censored. You have to stay with the script. You cannot improvise. If someone heckles you from the audience, you can't say, like, your mother wears army boots. Because she probably does. And she will hurt you. You have to be very careful what jokes you pick. If you say, like, take my wife, please, you get home, she's gone.
That was Yakov Smirnoff, probably the most popular Soviet comedian in the United States. His entire shtick is playing on the stereotypes that were and still are being bombarded into our minds by the Western media. It's easy to do that a handful of companies, like 5 companies, own 90% of all the media. Written, published, spoken, Sun. While information that comes from other sources is ridiculed and positioned as propaganda. However, there are countries, companies, and individuals that look at the world differently than what any media tells them to. This is Dylan Moran.
In the West, we have very little information about you. All we really have is some literature, some history, and some movies. And the movies are not very reliable. And the best way I found to find out about Russian people is to say to a Russian person, what are they like? But I can only speak to the ones in the West. And the way they describe Russians is intense, because they say they're the best people in the world. I hate them. I love them, but I hate them. They're so ignorant and so stupid, and the most intelligent people I've ever met. And they have amazing minds, they're incredibly stubborn, and they think about everything. They're very spiritual, but they're cold. They won't tell you anything. And then they tell you everything. They tell you everything that ever happened in their lives and what happened to their mother and their father and their grandmother and so on. And then they insist you stay for dinner. And you have to eat all the food, and the chairs and the curtains. The other way to find out about Russians is from film. That's the obvious way. But the Hollywood presentation is very stereotypical. It is always the same. The men tend to be all, bad guys who say things like, since I come to your country, I make bomb. They have a scar that goes from here down to here, and their left hand is a blender or a hook or something. And it's very easy for me to make bomb because you Americans are so stupid. You spend all the time playing baseball and eating hamburger. And the women are very tragic. The women, they look far away all the time and they say, I don't want to talk about it.
It is true. As the tensions grow in Middle East and the U.S. becomes a bit anxious that EU food sanctions are failing, that arming terrorists is failing, Russia needs to be presented yet again as an enemy. Russia joined the anti-ISIL campaign because U.S. coalition was doing jack. And right away, media ghouls jumped on the scene. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Why are they in UK and not in Syria, by the way? Seems like you'd be closer to the action. But I digress. These people began reporting about civilian deaths before Russian planes even took off the ground. Check the times they began reporting. Now, unless everyone at the observatory is a Nostradamus, it is a blatant lie, which brings us back to the supposedly massive flotilla of submarines in Sweden. Russia is again portrayed as the enemy. Just look at the movies coming out. In Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, the bad guy is a Russian. Bruce Willis fights some Russian dude in the latest Die Hard. Even Spider-Man is in on it. What's next? Mickey will be saving Minnie Mouse from Pete with a Russian accent? I'm Nick Blake, and you're listening to As If.